Welcome to Coffee with the Supervisor. And I have two very special guests today. Julie Ty, who is the president of the New York State League of Conservation Voters, a premier environmental organization that I personally have worked with on a lot of environmental initiatives. And of course, locally from Long Island, Adrian Esposito, who is the executive director of Citizens Campaign for the Environment, another environmental advocate. And today we're going to talk about the Environmental Bond Act that's up on November 8th. It's on the ballot. You may have to flip it over.
Yes.
That's right.
Because you now you don't have the machines anymore. Now you go in, you get a piece of paper with the little circles for the candidates, but on the reverse side will be one of the most important votes that you can take, Proposition 1. Now, Julie, tell us what this Bond Act is all about.
Sure.
What is it going to do? If I vote for this,
Yeah.
so I'm a voter. If I vote for this, how is this going to help New York? How is this going to help me? How's it going to help my family, my community? How's it going to help?
Sure. So the state legislature passed a $4.2 billion Clean Water, Clean Air, Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act. Right? It's something that we're going to be investing in capital projects and infrastructure to help improve our communities. There's $650 million that's going to be available for water infrastructure projects. So fixing our
Let's talk
pipes.
about water infrastructure.
Okay.
Brookhaven's a large town. In fact, it's the largest town in the state of New York by size and second by population with 500,000. But you go east. We have two areas, just off the top of my head, that I'm going to talk about. There's probably 20 areas. But we have the Manaville area that is being affected from the former Grumman Navy facility in Calverton, where we have 65 homes on the Brookhaven side, and Riverhead has another 60, 70 homes on the Riverhead side, whose wells are contaminated, and that's what they depend on, these wells, for their water. Then you go south of the expressway in an area as far east as you can go in Brookhaven called Peconic Lake Estates. You get about 120 homes there, and their wells. We just got a report from the Water Authority. $6 million to give them water mains, and their wells are impacted and contaminated. And I'm concerned about them and other areas in Brookhaven. Will this Bond Act help them get public water?
It will. Those are the types of projects that will be funded through this. There will be funding available for drinking water infrastructure, like the pipes to get people on
Right, from the
water.
Suffolk County Water Authority.
Exactly, exactly. There could also be funds to help with wastewater and getting people onto sewers or to upgrade their septic systems. So just like the state has been doing for the Clean Water Infrastructure.
Sewers aren't needed everywhere in
Right.
Brookhaven, particularly different parts of the eastern port of Brookhaven. But they are needed where you have a concentrated population and everyone is on cesspools, and all that cesspool waste is running eventually into our bays of Long Island Sound or our rivers or stream corridors. And that's not healthy because it impacts the water. And we don't have reservoirs like they do upstate. Like they do in Manhattan when they get the reservoirs from upstate. We get our water from underground. We're a sole source aquifer. So we're concerned about this.
Right. So I think
So Adrian,
who
you've
knows
been
more about our drinking water than me and you, Ed?
you've been a long-time advocate.
Well, one of these things I think it's really important to know about this particular Environmental Bond Act is that it will have funding for sewer infrastructure and for drinking water protection. So,
Right.
for instance, you and I know very well that Mastic Shirley, there are 4 segments there. 2 segments have funding for sewers, but we still need the funding for the last 2, the Mastic Beach area and a little bit north of Mastic Beach. This could
Unquestionably
provide
needed.
Yep, this could provide that funding.
A long time ago in a different life, when I left teaching, I started with the town in 1980. I was Commissioner of Housing and Community Development. Spent a ton of money putting water mains in the Mastic Shirley area because there's 50,000 people south of the tracks in that peninsula. But we never did the sewers. So
Right.
while they have clean water, Forge River, the Narrows, Moriches Bay, Great South Bay suffer from all the contamination from the cesspools.
Right.
Because they are densely packed into that community.
And I think it's important to note, for instance, the last bond act we had was 25 years ago, but 25 years ago there were plenty of places in Brookhaven that benefited from the last one.
Yes.
Mount Sinai Harbor, Port Jefferson Harbor,
Yep.
Stony Brook Harbor. They all received funding for filtration of stormwater to protect that harbor from contaminants. Also, the Suffolk County District 1, which is in Port Jeff Station, that sewage treatment plant, that was upgraded to the tune of $3 million from that grant to protect drinking water as well. So it worked 25 years ago, but here we are 25 years later, and we have new needs and more needs. And we like to say our drinking water infrastructure and our sewage infrastructure is not going to fix itself. So if we can get grants from the states that mean our taxes don't go up, and we can get this infrastructure fixed, everyone needs clean water. This is not a partisan issue.
Clean water,
It's an important one.
they need preserved farmland, open space.
So that's the next category.
Right.
So there's $650 million also available for open space preservation and for parks and recreation. So that's going to enable the state to give grants to local governments and to not-for-profits to buy land, to protect it. Could be for drinking water purposes, could be for recreation purposes, to improve the parks that you already have by making investments in making them better. So to enable the public to have better access to parks and open space.
It's so great. I used to represent most of the East End in the
Yeah.
legislature. And they have the Community Preservation Fund.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it came to a vote in Brookhaven many years ago and it was voted down.
I remember.
It was a narrow vote, but it was voted down. We are constantly struggling to try to save our open spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I have a little bumper sticker in my office that says, "Save what's left."
That's right. That's exactly right.
And because I don't want Brookhaven to look like Queens.
Mm-hmm.
No offense to Queens, but it's too densely populated. You get on our roads and you look at all the traffic and you realize population growth can impact if there's a tipping point. And if you go beyond that tipping point, you create problems for infrastructure, for traffic, for air quality, and a whole host of other things. So I want to see Brookhaven have as much open space as we possibly can, preserve what farmland we have left. I'm a huge advocate of that.
And a lot of people don't realize that in Suffolk County, there's still 30,000 acres of open space that's yet undeveloped that we actually could preserve, but we need the funding.
Right.
And this would provide a substantial amount of funding to achieve the goal to save what's left.
We have all types of parcels that we can present to
That's
that.
right.
We have a fund that we contribute to, and we have a fund that we ask developers to contribute to if they're a land intensification fee is what we call it. And that fund is used to purchase open space, critical open space that we think is important to preserve so that every square inch of the town is not developed. We think it's important to have a mix.
And Ed, I think people think that that's important too. I think people live here because they want clean water, they want open space, they want beautiful parklands.
They want trees.
They want trees.
want trees.
And they want beaches and bays that they could swim
Yes.
in without worrying about getting bacteria exposure or harmful algal blooms. And we have a lot of work to do. The good news is we do know how to fix these problems. The challenge is getting the funding, and the Bond Act provides the funding.
Well, I've been an elected official a long time, and the one thing you learn is all questions of government are questions of money. And furthermore, if you want to know how a government behaves, look how it spends its money. Now, I would only hope that this Bond Act could be complemented by the federal infrastructure program that was passed, which I supported. I know some people who did not, but I think in another life, I used to teach economics on the graduate level at Dowling when it was around. And the one thing you learn in economics is the best way to improve the productivity of a nation is to invest in its infrastructure. And green infrastructure is so important to our health and the security of our communities. And I know you work so hard in your statewide organization to promote that.
We do.
So talk a little bit about it.
So we know, like we've had AECOM did a study with one of our partners, Rebuild by Design, on what the economic benefits of the Bond Act would be.
Right.
And we estimate that the $4.2 billion will actually generate closer to $8.7 billion in economic activity, in part because it's going to help us leverage those federal funds from the infrastructure bill. it's also going to help us to create almost 100,000 good-paying jobs,
Which is
really
crucial.
important.
Improve the community and create jobs. That's what we need.
Right. And it's going to help us protect our communities, not just in making the investments in water infrastructure, which we know is really important for public health, but also making sure that we're protecting our communities from the impacts of flooding and of climate change. So we're really excited to have that happen. So it's a win-win-win when you look
We
at
are
all
watching
the
flooding
benefits.
with sea rise,
That's right.
and I know some people will poo-poo climate change. I don't. I'm concerned about it. We have adopted a strategy to retreat.
Yep.
And we're working with the Army Corps to raise some houses and other houses to purchase and demolish because they will constantly be flooded with the rising sea level, particularly in the Mastic Beach community, parts of Shirley, Brookhaven Hamlet. We're very concerned.
Even areas like Patchogue, it's very
Right.
low lying. We get a lot of flooding in Patchogue during,
Right.
even, we call it sunny day flooding. We have a new
Right.
term on Long Island where it's a beautiful sunny day, but because of the winds and tides, the streets are flooded.
Right.
Particularly in Mastic, but other places too.
Mastic Beach for
Patchogue.
sure. Even Santa Maria is where I live because it's on
Yes.
the bay.
So this
we're
bond-
worried about all of our communities. This bond act is not going to save everyone, but it's going to be a start to help us solve some of the problems that we know the solutions for, but we just need the funding for.
That's right.
Exactly.
And there is over $1 billion earmarked in this bond act for coastal resiliency, which means to protect against flooding.
Right.
And listen, if you live on the South Shore like I do, and you get that letter from your insurance company saying we're no longer going to insure your home,
Right.
you know
I've
we
got-
have a problem.
Yes, I can't get flood insurance in my house.
Many of us can't anymore.
So, because I live on the South Shore, I live near the water.
Yes,
I
me
don't
too.
live on the water, but I live near the water.
You might live on the water soon. No.
Well, I'm concerned about that.
Yep.
And what this bond does, this bond act is so important to help us plan for the future. It is a game changer because it will allow the state, the counties, the towns, even the villages to try to address some of the problems that they see. And we see these problems all the time. We see lots of problems. That's the challenge of being an elected official. You don't have the resources. Even if you have a solution, you don't have the resources to solve all of them. This will give us more resources and we can solve some of these problems.
Exactly. That's exactly what we need to be doing. And this is the first time since 1996 that voters are going to have the chance to say, yes, we want the state to be investing in making our communities more protected and improving our water infrastructure in particular.
And that is a good way to end the program, to remind people, please, Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th, the latest it can be.
Yeah.
When you go and vote, and there's a lot of people on the ballot, congressmen, governors, because it's state and federal elections this year, flip the ballot over with that magic marker that we have here in Suffolk County. It's been 25 years since the last Environmental Bond Act. Let's create jobs. Let's move to a new green technology that we can implement. Let's save open space, preserve farmland, help people with water quality problems, help people who need sewers. Let's do it. Let's vote November 8th.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having us on.
Thank you.